if you were to ask the legislators, if you were to ask the Congress who passed the machine gun ban whether or not a bump stock was a machine gun, they would have said yes, which, truth of that aside, I don't know that they would have. We are the Armed Attorneys. Today we are talking about the biggest Supreme Court case to come down for guns since Bruin. We're going to talk about what happened. Did the Supreme Court just rein in the ATF? Is this bigger than bump stocks? Does it affect FRTs, binary triggers? And finally, how is the government going to lick its wounds and go on from here? But before we get started, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button.
And today we got Cargill v. Garland. This came out June the 14th, 2024. We'll throw the case up on screen if anybody wants to go check out the opinion. Pretty short here. But overview, this is stems out of the 2020 rule in changing and expanding the definition of what constituted a machine gun. This was a change to the Code of Federal Regulations. They basically tacked on some stuff. They took the definition of machine gun that Congress provided them, added a whole bunch of stuff with regards to bump stocks. And you remember the ATF back then was saying, hey, destroy your bump stock or surrender your bump stock to us. Well, we have Michael Cargill out of Austin, Texas. Huge fan of Michael. Got my license to carry from Michael way back when. He sued. He surrendered 2 of his bump stocks, sued the ATF saying, hey, guess what? You have violated the Administrative Procedures Act. Fun fact, this is not a Second Amendment case, but we'll talk about that in a little bit later. And he lost in the district court. It went up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They had a small panel who affirmed the district court, said, guess what, you got it right. But when then they did a full en banc review out of the Fifth Circuit, they said, no, guess what, ATF, you exceeded your authority in trying to ban bump stocks. And then, guess what? Merrick Garland didn't like that answer, rolled the dice, said, I want to go to the Supreme Court, and potentially this rule would have just been limited to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Rolled the dice, took it up to the Supreme Court, and we got a fantastic opinion authored by Justice Thomas.
Yes, and I will say, of the hundreds of times Michael Cargill has sued the government, boy, he hit a home run this time. It is. But it is fantastic. And so really we've got, you can, I guess, divide this opinion into 2 prongs, right? We've got the actual functional technical analysis of what is a machine gun prong. Yep. And then we've got a little statutory analysis prong. So we'll try to do this in the most basic English way possible. So functionally speaking, the court looks at, and they in fact even include diagrams of
triggers. You don't see that very frequently.
You do not see that very frequently. And the court says, look, we understand that the ATF is saying that single function of the trigger means that you pull the trigger once and then you set off this series of events that really, as long as your finger isn't moving again, it's still one function of the trigger, multiple rounds expelled, thus it is a machine gun, but we don't buy it. So says Justice Thomas, we don't buy it either. And essentially we're looking at this very reasoned analysis that Richard and I will say, have been saying the whole time, which is that it is not a single function of the trigger. The trigger is still being pulled every time for every round that leaves the barrel. And that cannot ever be a machine gun. It is not a machine gun. The Supreme Court agrees. The angels are singing. Finally, that was always the rational thing. But then we have on top of that, I guess in addition, the ATF making its argument for statutory, interpretation. And what is that?
And we call this the presumption against ineffectiveness. And essentially what the dissent and the ATF were arguing were, hey, look, we have this statute. If we do not prohibit bump stocks, then guess what? Everybody can circumvent this machine gun ban, general prohibition on machine guns, and Congress will be rendered completely ineffective having written this law. And the majority opinion disagrees with that.
Right. So essentially, it's an interesting argument on behalf of the ATF because we have all of these rules for how you interpret statutes, and there are presumptions for all kinds of things. There are presumptions against overturning common law, if that's one of your options. There is a presumption for consistent usage. So the way a word or a phrase is defined, you define it consistently throughout the whole statute. It always means the same thing. But this presumption that they're arguing, essentially the ATF saying, look, really, Congress was prohibiting rapid fire. Right, rapid fire. And so if you allow bump stocks to be legal, then you have completely obstructed this statute because rapid fire is legal.
Yeah, and the majority opinion doesn't go along with that. They
No.
say, guess what? If we read the statute as it's written in black and white, there is still a general prohibition on machine guns in place. The Congress still is affecting people with a law, and so this thing isn't being completely made ineffective, and it still serves an important purpose. But to your kind of point about if they wanted to ban rapid fire of firearms, then the Congress could pass a rapid fire of firearms law that we're talking theoretically, right? New York State Pistol and Rifle Association aside for a moment, but Alito kind of goes for that.
Oh boy. And this, it didn't make me as nervous when I first read it as it has during the course of our offline discussions here. But yes, so we have a concurrence here. And weirdly, so it's Justice Alito. It is a like 1 paragraph concurrence. It's very, very short. Again, odd. And you would say to yourself, and I am saying to myself, why in the world do you need to write a 1 paragraph concurrence in this case? Because it just doesn't pass the smell test for me. Because here is the content of his concurrence. Is he essentially says, look, if you were to ask the legislators, if you were to ask the Congress who passed the machine gun ban whether or not a bump stock was a machine gun, they would have said yes. Which, truth of that aside, I don't know that they would have, because it seems like they were pretty darn specific in what a machine gun is. But he says, he is sure they would have said this is a machine gun that should have been banned. However, it really does not meet the statutory definition, and we cannot cram it into this very specific definition. But what should happen then is that Congress can now, and unspoken, but I think pretty clear, should now go and pass a law that would prohibit and ban bump stocks. Again, not says Emily, says Justice Alito.
That was written by Dianne Feinstein. Justice Feinstein.
Stop it. But this is what's disturbing to me, is that he sits on the Supreme Court and he should know better.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well,
I mean, pick that up.
Well, where I would say is, and we kind of hinted at this earlier, this is not a Second Amendment opinion. You will not find reference to New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin. We have, going back to our rules of kind of statutory construction, interpretation, and judicial rule, we resolve things at the lowest level possible. We have a statute here, the Administrative Procedures Act. We're going to resolve it there instead of looking at the Constitution and the Second Amendment, and that's what the court does here. So, I mean, this isn't a Second Amendment opinion, but when we have Alito saying things like that...
saying things like, pass a gun law that is probably prohibited under Bruin, at least by my reading of Bruin.
Yeah, I don't like that. But I will say...
because he knows what the thing is, that this is what I'm getting this angrier the longer we talk about it. He knows. He didn't forget about Bruin. He didn't forget. And so in order to write that, he must believe that this anti-bump stock legislation would pass Bruin muster.
Yeah, but what? Yeah, that's not ideal.
I don't know of a 1791 law against bump stocks.
Not aware of something back in 1791, but we do get, I would actually say, a surprising source of relief here from the dissent. They acknowledge that AR style firearms are in common use.
Sure,
I'll take that.
We'll take it.
And so I'm not going to interrupt the opposition when they're kind of stepping on themselves, but that's the standard we got. Where we get that?
Right. So Miller, we've got some protections for firearms in the common use. So I mean, it is interesting language, but of course, it is in the dissent. It is not binding at all. So it's just interesting. But
I know the question that a lot of folks have are, there are other devices, not bump stocks. Think forced reset triggers, FRTs. Think binary triggers. There's some other stuff floating around out there. I'm sure there's tons of gadgets that I haven't even seen. How is this going to impact those devices?
This reasoning is 100% on point for those things.
Yeah.
100%. Now, this is a case about bump stocks. However, the reasoning is the same. If If the trigger is resetting in order to shoot another bullet, it is not a machine gun.
Yeah,
we know that.
if there has to be some action performed by the person firing.
Right. By you and internally in the firearm.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, it is.
Because we look at those two things.
Easy.
Yeah, two things distinct. We look at the mechanism. If the mechanism's not firing it by itself, it requires some outside input from the person shooting. It's going to fail under this standard all day.
Yes. So we have good, because we've been saying like all these things are next. All these things are next. You know, I mean, obviously they're already confiscating FRTs, but what about binary triggers? What about anything potentially that can accelerate your rate of fire could have been on the table if this passed muster, and it is all dead in the water now. We are up for anyone who's doing weird stuff to your trigger. Just go for it.
And I mean, and then the bump stock ban that was upheld in the 11th Circuit, you were dead.
Oh yeah, big time.
But,
so this is right for all of our doom and gloom about what happens if they pass a law, and is Alito signaling to us that he thinks that law would be constitutional. It is a very good day for the Second Amendment.
And so we'll leave it with an important message from our friend Michael Cargill.
You go out there and you buy yourself a gun. Better yet, get yourself a bump stock.
So we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And please question and comment for us below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.